The letter arrived on a damp Thursday morning, its envelope yellowed by time and sealed with brittle wax. Margaret found it nestled between electricity bills and unwanted catalogs, a thin, peculiar thing with no return address. Only her name in slanted black ink. Nothing more. She didn't recognize the handwriting, yet her hands trembled as she opened it. The message inside was short: Wraithmoor House awaits your presence. All will be revealed. Come alone. There was no explanation. No date, but the words seemed to hum with urgency. Margaret stared at them until the kettle whistled behind her, breaking the silence like a scream. Wraithmoor House. She hadn't heard that name in years, not since she was a child. It was a place spoken of in whispers, if at all. The house at the edge of the woods. Abandoned. Watching. They said strange things happened there. That the walls could breathe. That people entered and changed. Or never came out at all. It was probably a joke, she thought. Some childish prank. And yet. By evening, Margaret was packing. The drive out of town was long and winding, the sky growing darker with every mile. The trees closed in like spectators, their leafless branches arched above the narrow road like skeletal arms. Her GPS failed just past the old mill. After that, she drove by instinct and fading memory. When she reached the house, dusk had fallen. Wraithmoor stood in silhouette, an immense structure of stone and shadow. The windows were black, like eyes that had long since forgotten how to blink. Vines strangled the lower walls, and the iron gate stood half open, as if expecting her. Margaret stepped out of the car, her breath rising in clouds. The air was colder here, unnaturally so. Her boots crunched over gravel and dead leaves as she approached the porch. The wood groaned under her weight. A single lantern flickered beside the door. She raised her hand to knock, but the door opened before she could. No one stood there. Only darkness. She called out softly. Hello. No answer. The air inside smelled of dust and something older, like dried roses left to rot. Margaret stepped over the threshold, the door closing behind her with a slow, heavy creak. The hallway was narrow, the walls lined with faded portraits that seemed to tilt ever so slightly toward her. The silence was complete, thick and pressing. Her footsteps were muffled by an ancient rug, worn to the threads. She wandered farther in. The floorboards beneath her moaned in protest. She saw no light switches, no signs of recent life. Yet the fireplace in the drawing room glowed faintly, embers pulsing like a sleeping heart. A strange comfort settled over her. It didn't feel welcoming exactly, but familiar. As if the house remembered her. She ran her fingers over the banister, tracing its curves. Then she heard it. A soft tapping. Not from the door but the walls. Tap. 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 It stopped the moment she turned. Margaret stood still, heart quickening. She tried to rationalize it. Pipes, perhaps. Or rodents in the walls. But the sound had been too deliberate. Too slow. Like fingers. She climbed the stairs, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The steps were steep, the wallpaper torn in strips like claw marks. Upstairs, a long hallway stretched before her, doors on either side like mouths sealed shut. She tried one. It opened with a sigh. Inside was a room untouched by time. Dust floated in the air like snow. A mirror stood across from the bed, its surface cloaked in a white sheet. Margaret approached it slowly. The sheet twitched slightly as if stirred by breath. She pulled it off. The mirror was cracked. but it wasn't the break that made her freeze. It was the reflection. Behind her, just over her shoulder, stood a figure. Tall. Pale. Featureless. She spun around. Nothing. Only the empty room. The broken mirror. The silence. Margaret stepped back. Her reflection now looked normal, but her face was pale, eyes wide. She whispered to herself, "I'm imagining things." And yet, the air was colder now. She could see her breath. Then, softly, from somewhere beyond the hallway, a voice. Faint. Female. Singing. Not a tune she knew. Not in any language she recognized. Just a lullaby, drifting through the floorboards. Margaret didn't run. She should have. She knew that. But something deep within her pulsed in time with the house. Her skin prickled with electricity. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. This place knew her. This place had been waiting. As she turned to leave the room, she noticed something carved into the back of the door. A single word. Margaret. Her name. Scratched deep, as if by fingernails. The wood splintered. The grooves dark with age. She stumbled back, breath shallow. Her hand brushed against her pocket, and she remembered the letter. All will be revealed. Downstairs, the door creaked open again, slow and inviting. Margaret turned to face the hallway. And stepped deeper into Wraithmoor House. Margaret descended the staircase slowly, her hand brushing along the dusty railing as though expecting it to vanish beneath her touch. The house seemed to shift with her steps, wood groaning, the air thick with unspoken memory. She did not ask herself why she stayed. Something deeper than logic had taken hold. It felt less like curiosity and more like obligation. The front door, which had creaked open moments before, now stood shut again, silent as stone. She didn't try it. Instead, her eyes drifted toward the corridor to her left, a narrow passage half swallowed in shadow. She hadn't noticed it earlier. Or maybe it hadn't been there before. Wraithmoor House didn't move like ordinary buildings. It breathed. It decided. The corridor ended at a heavy door. Different from the rest. While others sagged on rusted hinges, this one was pristine. Too pristine. Its black wood was unmarked. No dust. No scratches. Just a single silver keyhole that gleamed like a watchful eye. No handle. Margaret placed her palm against it. Cold. Unyielding. She stepped back, ready to turn away when something shifted beneath the floor, a deep, hollow thump, like a heartbeat buried in the walls. Then a soft click. A key fell from above, landing soundlessly at her feet. She picked it up. It was warm. The key fit. The door opened. What lay beyond wasn't what she expected. Not a secret room or an ancient chamber. But a child's nursery. It was untouched by dust. A wooden rocking horse sat in the corner, slowly moving as if stirred by unseen hands. A music box rested on a shelf, its lid open, though it made no sound. Sunlight, impossible sunlight, poured in from a window that should not exist. Outside, trees swayed in a wind she couldn't feel. Margaret stepped inside. A single crib sat in the center of the room, draped with pale lace. She approached slowly. No child lay inside, only a faded stuffed rabbit, its eyes mismatched, one missing entirely. She picked it up. Beneath the toy, etched into the mattress, were initials, M.H. Margaret Hastings. Her own. She stumbled back, breath-catching. She had never been here before. Had she? The air thickened. The door creaked closed behind her. The rocking horse stopped. From the far corner, a faint rustling. Like papers shifting. She turned slowly, eyes searching the walls. There, near the window, was a small writing desk. Upon it lay a single journal, leather-bound and cracked with age. She opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably her own. But the entries, they described moments she didn't remember being held in that crib, a lullaby sung by a voice that hummed through her bones, nights of crying without knowing why, a woman with hollow eyes watching from the mirror. Then silence. Pages torn. And at the end, a single sentence, "She never left." The music box clicked. Its lid began to close on its own, playing a tune that sounded off melodic, but fractured. A child's lullaby played backward. The window darkened. The walls seemed closer now, the corners heavier, the air pressed down on her shoulders like wet cloth. Margaret stepped back toward the door, but it didn't open. It was no longer a door. Just a wall. Smooth. Seamless. She ran her fingers along it, heart pounding. No crack. No handle. No escape. The crib creaked. The rabbit had fallen to the floor. "It's missing," I stared at her. And then, soft and shivering, a whisper filled the room, not from the walls, but from inside her own mind, "You left me." The journal flipped open on its own. New words began to etch themselves across the final page. Margaret watched in frozen horror. She remembers now. She opened the door. Now she must stay. The rocking horse groaned once more. The sun vanished from the window, replaced by dense fog. And in that fog, just beyond the glass, a figure emerged. Small. Pale. Barefoot. A child. Its face was shadowed, but its eyes. They were hers. Margaret dropped the journal. The child outside raised a hand. Not in greeting but in mimicry. It placed its palm flat against the window. Margaret did the same, compelled. Cold met cold. And someone entered her mind. Images flashed. A crib. A woman crying. The mirror shattering. Darkness. Silence. Margaret recoiled, gasping. When she looked again, the child was gone. The window was black. The music stopped. And the door, no longer a wall, stood open once more. She fled the nursery without looking back. Back in the corridor, Wraithmoor House exhaled. She could feel it. The house had shared something. A memory. A piece of itself. Or perhaps a piece of her. She descended the stairs again, knees weak. The fire in the drawing room had died. But in its place, smoke curled along the floor, spelling a word in pale wisps. Welcome. Margaret didn't sleep that night. The house whispered around her. And upstairs, behind a door that now no longer existed, the nursery waited. And the mirror was not empty. Morning never came. Margaret waited by the window, wrapped in a moth-eaten blanket, hoping to see dawn bleed through the horizon. But the sky remained a heavy gray, as if Wraithmoor stood sealed away from the passage of time. No sun. No birdsong. Only the low groan of floorboards and the occasional murmur in the walls. She had not dreamed. Or perhaps she had, but the memory of it clung to her like smoke. Whispers behind her eyes. A child's breath at her ear. She could still feel the warmth of the small hand that had touched hers through the nursery window. But there had been no window when she fled. Just stone. Cold and blank. Wraithmoor was not a house. It was a presence. A design. And she was becoming part of it. Drawn by something unspoken, Margaret wandered through the halls again. They were unfamiliar now longer, turning where they hadn't before. Staircases led to half-floors and balconies that overlooked rooms she hadn't passed. Every mirror she passed was veiled in linen. Tall, thin shapes hidden like sleeping statues. She longed to lift the covers, to stare herself down. But she didn't. Not yet. Then, in the eastern wing, a place she didn't know how she'd reached, she found a door different from the rest. Smaller. Crooked. Almost childlike in scale. It opened without effort. Inside was a parlor drenched in shadow. A single armchair faced the corner where a large mirror stood. This one was uncovered, and its glass shimmered faintly despite the gloom. The chair was empty. But the mirror was not. At first, she saw only herself. Pale. Weary. Then the image flickered. Behind her reflection, the room stretched farther than it should. Endless, darkened hallways spiraled out from the edges of the glass. She leaned closer. Squinting. A figure stood far down one of those mirrored corridors. Unmoving. Watching. Her breath caught. Its face was indistinct. Blurred. But its posture was unmistakably familiar. As if it had once been her, but something in it had changed. Warped. She stepped back. The reflection did not. It remained, still watching. The mirror fogged slightly, as if exhaling. And then the voice came again, not out loud, but in her chest, vibrating through her bones. You've seen it before. Her mind recoiled. But another image surfaced. She was young. 5-6 a hallway. A mirror taller than she was. A woman, her mother, screaming in the background. Margaret had reached out and touched the glass. It had been cold. But something had touched her back. Tears welled in her eyes. She hadn't remembered that day in years. Her mother had forbidden mirrors after that. Covered everyone. Broken some. Margaret had thought it was grief, or madness. Now she knew it had been fear. The reflection behind her stepped forward. Still inside the glass. But closer. Its features shifted, almost imperceptibly. Its smile did not belong to her. It reached toward the surface. She turned to flee, but the door had vanished again, melted into wall. The whisper came once more, softer now. You left us. The mirror rippled. Like water. Her feet moved without command. Her fingers stretched out. She touched the glass. And the room flipped. Suddenly, Margaret was no longer in the parlor. She stood in a mirror of it, identical in shape, but reversed. Dimmer. Colder. The air held weight, and each shadow curled toward her like fingers. The mirror behind her now showed the real room. The armchair. The door. And her own reflection stood there, smiling. Margaret turned. Nothing but hallway. Something had taken her place. Panic set in, but logic failed her. Wraithmoor had no rules. She walked, not knowing if the hallway in this mirror world would lead anywhere, but unable to remain still. Portraits on the walls stared at her with blank eyes. Doors lined the path, but each led to empty spaces, rooms with peeling wallpaper, half-crushed furniture, broken dolls. In one room, she found a cradle identical to the one from the nursery. Empty. Until she blinked. Then, for an instant, the child lay inside again. Pale. Silent. Its eyes opened. Not newborn eyes. Old. Knowing. Her own. Margaret ran. The corridors twisted, spiraling downward, like the ribs of a buried beast. She passed rooms filled with clocks, all ticking out of sync. Some ran backward. She felt herself unraveling. But at last, another mirror appeared freestanding in the center of a hexagonal room. Its glass was darker. Thicker. She stepped before it. Her own reflection returned, this time fractured, like stained glass. Each shard showed a different moment. Her childhood bedroom. Her mother weeping. The inside of a closet where she'd hidden as a girl. And always Raith Moore. Present in the corners of every memory. The house had been watching her for years. Waiting. A voice clearer now, almost kind, whispered, "Do you remember now?" She nodded slowly, eyes wet. Yes. She had been here before. She had touched the glass before. She had forgotten. Buried it? Her fingers brushed the mirror's surface. This time, it yielded. And she stepped through. She emerged back in the real parlor. The chair was still empty. The door creaked open on its own. But the house was quieter now. No longer hungry. Just listening. And in her pocket, where there had been nothing before, she found a torn photo herself as a child, standing outside Raith Moore, hand in hand with a woman whose face had been scratched away. On the back, in trembling script, "Bring her home." Margaret wandered the halls like a ghost. The house no longer tried to frighten her. It didn't need to. Now, it simply watched. The walls pulsed with memories. Footsteps she didn't make echoed behind her. Mirrors blinked in and out of existence. Doors moved when she wasn't looking. But worse was the silence. It wasn't empty, it was listening. The photo in her pocket weighed heavily. "Bring her home," it said. But who? The child from the cradle, the woman with the scratched out face, her mother, or something older? She followed no map now. Just instinct. Or perhaps the house guided her. Eventually, it led her to a room she had never seen. A narrow door at the base of the western tower. Locked once but now ajar, as though it had been waiting. The inside was not a room, but a spiral staircase made of black wood, descending into utter darkness. Margaret hesitated. But her feet moved anyway. The steps wound tighter the deeper she went. There were no sounds. Not her breath. Not her steps. Just stillness. Until she reached the bottom. There, at the end of a short hallway, stood a massive iron door. No handle. Just a faint seam in the metal, as if it had been sealed for centuries. But as she stepped forward, it opened. Inside was nothing. No furniture. No color. No corners. Just white. A pale, pulsing white that stretched forever in all directions. And silence, deafening, complete. Her own thoughts echoed. She tried to speak. No sound came. And then something did. A presence. Not seen. But felt. It stepped around her, above her, through her. Her name echoed not from outside, but inside her skull. Margaret. Then another voice. Fainter. Familiar. "You remember me now, don't you?" She turned. There stood the girl. The same child from the nursery. Barefoot. Pale. But her eyes were no longer Margaret's. They were empty. Black. The child didn't move. Didn't blink. She just watched. And then she smiled. The room began to pulse like a heart. And Margaret remembered. The first time she saw Rathmore, she was just a girl. Her mother had taken her there for one summer. She had gotten lost inside. Found the nursery. Found her. But when they left, one of them hadn't. The child had been left behind. Not flesh and blood, but something else. Something mirrored. A reflection without a body. A shadow with memory. You left me, the child said without sound. You forgot. The air turned cold. The white faded into gray. The child stepped forward. You have what I need. Margaret backed away. What is that, she whispered, though no sound should be carried. Your place. The child smiled wider. And your voice. The shadows bent. Margaret felt her legs weaken. The room began to distort, walls stretching, cracking with silence, the very space unraveling like a spool of thread. You're not real, Margaret said, though she wasn't sure anymore. The child tilted her head. Neither are you. Not here. Not anymore. Then the mirrors returned, all around her, lining the white void. Each showed Margaret at a different age. As a child. As a teen. As she was now. And in each one the girl stood just behind her, hand on her shoulder, unseen. Always there. Waiting. Margaret fell to her knees. Tears welled but didn't fall. She realized, suddenly, what the house wanted. It didn't feed on fear. It fed on forgotten things. Abandoned memories. Unspoken truths. The house was grief, sealed into wood and stone. And this child, she was the memory Margaret left behind. A piece of her broken in childhood. Locked away. Now it wanted to be whole again. Take me back, the child said. Margaret nodded. I will. The room faded to black. The mirrors shattered not with noise, but feeling. A rush of cold. And then she was standing at the top of the stairs again. The tower door shut behind her. She moved with purpose now. Room by room, the house fell silent as she passed, like it knew what was coming. Back to the nursery. Where it had all begun. The crib still sat in the center. The rabbit still missing its eye. She placed the photo gently on the mattress. Then looked into the mirror. This time, the child was not behind her. She was beside her. I remember you now, Margaret whispered. I remember what they did to us. What they made us forget. The girl nodded. No smile now. Just a strange peace. The mirror pulsed. Then stilled. For the first time, the child reached for Margaret. And Margaret took her hand. There was no flash. No scream. No unraveling. Just quiet. The nursery faded. And Rathmore sighed. A long, slow exhale. The house didn't vanish. But it rested. For now. And outside, for the first time in days, the sky began to brighten. Not with sunlight. But something close enough. Rathmore House was no longer twisting beneath Margaret's feet. Its walls had stopped breathing. The corridors were quiet, not with menace, but a kind of mourning. Something had been returned. Something long broken had found its place again. But the house had not finished with her. It had never been about escape. It was about remembrance. Margaret stood in the main hall, beneath the chandelier that no longer flickered. Dust still floated in the still air, but the cold had lifted, as if the house's pulse had slowed. She closed her eyes, listening. There it was, faint, nearly imperceptible, the sound of a lullaby. No instrument. No voice. Just memory. She followed it. Not through doors, but through feeling. Each step took her deeper into the spine of Wraithmoor, places she had passed, but never truly seen. The house showed her now, piece by piece. Her own initials carved into the baseboard of a forgotten sitting room. A crayon drawing hidden behind wallpaper, a son, a girl, a tall crooked house. A child's teacup with her name written under it in her mother's script. Fragments of a childhood she had buried. And behind them, always, the same echo, "You left us." But now the voice was not angry. It was afraid. She reached the final door near the heart of the house, a room that had remained locked for decades. The brass handle was warm. Inside was a study, untouched by time. Books lined the walls. A record player sat in the corner. And in the center, a large oak desk covered in letters. Margaret stepped forward and saw the name on the first envelope. "To my daughter, if you remember." It was her mother's handwriting. Her knees gave way as she sat, clutching the paper. Hands trembling, she opened it. The words within were sharp and trembling. "My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, then you've returned to Wraithmoor. I begged you never to come back. I tried to keep the memories from you. You must understand it wasn't your fault. That summer, you wandered off into the Eastern Wing. You saw things. Things that broke something inside you. You stopped speaking. You forgot yourself. I brought you away from here and did everything I could to protect you. But a part of you stayed behind. I think the house kept it. This place is not haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by remnants. By echoes of people who were never allowed to finish becoming. You were one of them. I'm so sorry." The letter ended without a signature. Just a single word at the bottom, "Remember." Margaret sat motionless. Tears fell freely now, not from fear, but from the weight of things she never understood. Things that had shaped her life, quietly, cruelly. Wraithmoor hadn't created the darkness in her, it had reflected it. It had kept the forgotten part of her, and now, it wanted her to see. She turned to the far wall. There, embedded in the paneling, was the final mirror. Round. Black-rimmed. Still. Margaret approached and gazed into it. This time, she did not see herself. She saw the girl, not a specter. Not a monster. Just a frightened child. And then, for the first time, Margaret spoke to her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I forgot you. I let them convince me you were just a dream." The child did not answer. But her eyes shimmered. The mirror cracked not violently, but gently, like ice breaking on a thawing lake. And behind the glass, a door appeared. Margaret stepped through. The room beyond was dimly lit and smelled faintly of lavender. A nursery, but not the haunted one from before. This one was whole. Clean. Time had not touched it. A small bed. A shelf of books. A rocking chair, gently moving on its own. And in that chair sat her mother. Not alive. Not dead. Just present. As if waiting in a memory too heavy to fade. She looked up. And smiled. Not with joy but with release. "You found her," she said. Margaret nodded. "I found me." The house sighed again. But it wasn't ominous. It was like breath leaving the body. Wraithmoor was done holding its secrets. The nursery dimmed. And when Margaret stepped back into the hallway, the house was empty. Not lifeless. Just at peace. The walls no longer shifted. Mirrors no longer whispered. She passed the staircase where shadows once moved. Past the door where the forest had once moaned. Everything remained. But it was no longer watching. When she stepped outside, the sky was blue. Not bright. Not joyful. But calm. The air held warmth. And for the first time in her life, Margaret no longer felt like a fractured thing. She turned back to the house. Its windows were dark. Its frame, still. But in the highest window of the western tower, she saw her reflection. And beside it? The girl. Smiling. Together. Then the image faded. And only the window remained. Empty. Margaret walked down the path and into the trees. Behind her, the house stood silent. As it always had. And always would. But its secret was no longer waiting to be found. It had been remembered. And in that remembering, it finally slept.